Welcome to my channel. Tonight's story will pull you into a classroom that shouldn't exist. It's called Room 305, and once you enter, the rules of reality no longer apply. Because in this room, only one student ever leaves. When I was a sophomore at Harrison High, a public school in a quiet town nestled between rolling Pennsylvania hills and abandoned steel mills, I found myself accidentally caught in a place that didn't make sense. It happened in the spring, right when the weather warms enough to tease summer but the air still clings to a crisp chill at night. I was never one to break rules or wander off alone. But what happened wasn't something I chose. It was something that chose me. I was staying late for a group project. Our school was old. One of those 1920s brick monstrosities with wrought iron gates, stone lions guarding the stairwells, and 4 floors of dimly lit hallways that smelled like lemon-scented floor polish and musty paper. The kind of place where even during the day you always felt like you were being watched. My group had been assigned to work on a presentation about post-war literature, and only 2 of us had bothered to show up. Myself and a girl named Erin from my English class. We met in the library around 3:30 p.m., right as the last bell rang. She suggested we go to her old homeroom on the 3rd floor since it would be quieter than the library, which still buzzed with club meetings and student chatter. I didn't think much of it at the time. I'd never been to room 305, but I figured, why not? We climbed the main staircase to the 3rd floor. The lights up there were always finicky, half were burnt out or flickering. Our footsteps echoed through the empty halls, and the only sound other than that was the occasional metallic groan from the old steam pipes behind the walls. The 3rd floor was used for overflow classes, ones without permanent teachers or special programs that came and went. Some rooms were locked up. Others had windows covered with black construction paper. Erin stopped in front of a gray metal door. "This is it," she said, turning the knob. It opened with a squeak that made me wince. Inside, the classroom was, well, ordinary. Desks, chalkboard, a teacher's podium. The windows were shut, but sunlight filtered through slatted blinds in long horizontal bars. The walls were painted an institutional beige, cracked in some spots like dried skin. We got to work. She pulled out her notes. I opened my laptop. Time passed. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. We weren't talking much, just comparing paragraphs and deciding who would present what. I remember glancing at the wall clock and noticing that the second hand had stopped ticking. It was stuck at 4:47. Weird. I checked my phone. No signal. That should have been my first sign. I asked Erin if she had service. She checked. Nope. She smiled. Welcome to the black hole of the school. I remember laughing. Looking back, it sounds absurd, but it was easier to write it off as a fluke. Dead zones in old buildings aren't exactly rare. But then the light shifted. I don't know how else to describe it. The golden afternoon haze turned grayish, dusty, almost like someone had draped gauze over the sun. The air felt heavier. Erin was in the middle of reading a passage from her notes when she paused mid-sentence. "Did you hear that?" she asked. I hadn't, but once she said it, I strained to listen. And then I did hear it, a low humming. Not mechanical, not electrical. It sounded organic, like a deep breath drawn out for too long. A sound that vibrated in my bones rather than my ears. "Probably the radiator," I offered. Erin shook her head. "There's no radiator in this room. They replaced it with central heating last year." We both stood up. That was when we noticed it. The door was gone. Not locked, not jammed. Gone. Where there had been a door, the same metal one we'd walked through earlier, there was now just a seamless beige wall. Not even a trace of an outline. Just smooth plaster with a faint sheen under the flickering fluorescent ceiling panels. Erin walked up to it, her breath shallow. She placed her hand where the door had been. "This isn't funny," she said, turning to me. "I'm not doing anything," I replied, walking over. I tapped the wall. Solid. Then we both began searching. Pulling at the windows, they wouldn't budge. Looking for hidden seams or emergency exits. Nothing. I even pulled a desk over and tried standing on it to remove a ceiling tile. They wouldn't lift. That was when Erin suggested something I'll never forget. I think the room moved. What? I think we're not on the 3rd floor anymore. Or anywhere at all. I wanted to laugh. I really did. But there was something about her tone, dead serious, not hysterical, that stopped me. And she was right, in a way. Everything felt off. The air smelled different. Not dusty or musty, but sterile, like a hospital room or sealed lab. And that low humming, it had grown louder. Then something changed. A knock. From inside the wall. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks like knuckles against drywall. Erin and I both froze. Then again 3 more. Neither of us moved. I don't know how long we stood there, staring at that featureless wall. 10 seconds? A minute? And then we heard the whisper. Right behind us. Who's still here? We spun around. Nothing. The desks were empty. The room was silent again, except for that humming, which had now taken on a rhythm, like a slow, measured heartbeat. Erin clutched my sleeve. We need to get out. I nodded. I didn't care how. We pulled open drawers, checked under desks, pounded the windows until our knuckles turned red. Nothing gave. Then we noticed the door again. It was back. Same color. Same metal handle. Just back. Like it had never vanished. I ran to it and pulled. It opened. Relief flooded me. Erin and I stepped into the hallway. Only it wasn't the hallway. It was another classroom. But not just any classroom, it was room 305. Again. Same layout. Same desks. Same blinds on the windows. We backed out slowly. But as soon as the door clicked shut behind us, it disappeared again. We weren't back. We weren't out. We were deeper. That's when the intercom clicked on. Only our school didn't have intercoms in individual classrooms. Not old ones like these. A voice came through. Raspy, whispering, like dry leaves. Sit. Class is not dismissed. Then the lights went out. We screamed. I fumbled for my phone. Still dead. I switched on the flashlight app. It flickered weakly. Erin was huddled by the teacher's desk, her eyes wide. It wants us here. What does? She didn't answer. She just pointed behind me. I turned. The chalkboard now had writing on it. We hadn't touched it. There was no chalk in the room. But across the green surface, written in tall, looping letters, was a message. Only one of you will leave. I stepped back. Erin whispered, Don't read it. It gives it power. I looked at her. You've seen this before? She hesitated. Once. That was when everything came into sharp, gut-wrenching focus. This wasn't your homeroom, was it? She didn't answer. You brought me here, I said. Why? She started crying. I thought if I gave it someone new, it would let me go. My throat went dry. What do you mean, gave it someone? She sobbed harder now. I got stuck last year. Same way. No one believed me. I only got out when I brought someone back. Told me. In my dreams. In the whispers. You used me? I'm sorry. That was when I saw the walls begin to move. Not crumble, move. Like skin pulsing with veins. The hum grew into a roar. I turned and ran for the door again. This time it wasn't gone. But behind me, Erin didn't follow. I can't go, she said. It won't let both of us. I didn't want to leave her. But the room was closing in. I turned the handle and everything went white. When I opened my eyes, I was sitting in the library, alone. My laptop was closed in front of me. The sun was gone. Outside, streetlights buzzed. My phone buzzed too, signal restored. I looked around. No Erin. No sign I had ever left. But the weirdest part? When I asked around, no one in our class remembered an Erin. Not the teacher. Not the office. Not even the yearbook. She didn't exist. But I do. And every time I walk past room 305, I swear the knob is just a little bit warmer than the rest. Like it's waiting. The days that followed my escape or release, or whatever the hell it was, blurred into each other like the smeared pages of a dream journal. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, shadows sticking to my walls like they had mass. I'd stare at the ceiling, half expecting a whisper to call my name again. But nothing came. No voice, no dream, no Erin. Except she was still there. Not in the real world. Not in any records. Not in the dusty archives of our school's attendance logs or class rosters. But I'd catch glimpses of her, out of the corner of my eye, in reflections that didn't match my movements, in passing windows, even in dreams, especially in dreams, and always by that door. Room 305. Once, after school, I stood in front of it again. The hallway was cold, quieter than usual, like the walls were listening. I could have sworn I heard breathing on the other side. Then the knob twitched, not turned, twitched. A small, involuntary muscle spasm of metal. I didn't touch it. I left, but I didn't stay away for long. Something about the room had changed me. It had burrowed in, twisted its fingers around my spine, and made the world just a little more porous. I started seeing things no one else saw. Shadows that bent the wrong direction. Faces in windows of rooms that had no lights. I knew they were connected to the room. More than once, I considered seeing a therapist. Telling someone. Anyone. But how do you explain that reality itself blinked for a moment and spat you out somewhere else? I didn't think I'd ever go back. Until I met Natalie. She was a transfer student. Moved to Harrison High from 2 towns over. Joined mid-semester. Tall, blonde, smart. The kind of girl who seemed to carry her own soundtrack when she walked. People were drawn to her. But she didn't seem interested in any of it. We shared English class, and one day after a pop quiz, she leaned over and said something that made my blood run cold. "You've been to the classroom too, haven't you?" I turned. My pencil slipped from my hand and rolled off the desk. She was staring at me with eyes that didn't blink. Waiting. "I don't know what you mean," I said, but she didn't press. Just smiled faintly and looked away. That afternoon, I found a note in my locker. No name. Just one sentence written in black pen. "If you want answers, meet me in the boiler room. 4 p.m. I almost didn't go. Almost. But curiosity is a sharp hook, and the note had lodged it deep in my brain. By 4 p.m., I found myself in the south stairwell, descending into the guts of the school. The boiler room was one of those restricted zones, padlocked during regular hours. But the lock was broken, cleanly snapped, as if someone had sliced through it with shears made of fire. Inside, the air was hot and damp. The machinery hissed and churned. Shadows slithered between the pipes. Natalie stood near the far wall, hands in her pockets. "I was hoping you'd come," she said. "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone like you. Someone the room noticed." She turned and faced me. "I went there last year, at my old school. The room doesn't stay in one place. It moves." "You're saying it travels?" She nodded. "Like a parasite, latches on to schools, disguises itself. It waits for students, feeds on fear, traps them." "I got out," I said. She stepped closer. "You think that means you're free?" That silenced me. Natalie walked over to a small table behind the boiler tanks. She pulled a tattered file from a bag, spread out its contents. Photos, drawings, newspaper clippings, some yellowed with age, some recent. One was of a boy from 1963, missing. Last seen at St. Hedwig's Academy in New Jersey. Another was a girl from 1979, vanished during detention. Same circumstances, same story, different states. Then a sketch, a crude drawing in charcoal. The classroom, exactly how I remembered it. This has been happening for decades, she said. It's always a room. It always traps students. Sometimes it lets them go. Sometimes it doesn't. Why us? She shrugged. Maybe we're just the ones who notice. I stared at the pile. Something clicked. One of the photos, dated 1998, had a girl in a school uniform. I recognized her face. Erin. The name tag on her shirt read Michelle D. But it was her. No doubt. I pointed. This girl. I know her. She called herself Erin. She said she was trapped. Natalie looked at the picture. Michelle Dufresne went missing in 1998. Her school demolished the wing where the room was found. Never recovered her body. She's still in there, I whispered. She's not the only one. Then Natalie told me the rest. That some people don't just get stuck. They become part of it. Absorbed. Changed. Like barnacles clinging to the hull of a ship. She said Michelle or Erin or whoever she was likely made a deal to escape, just like she had tried to do with me. But it never ends. The room keeps calling. Always hungry. Always patient. That night I had the dream again. Only this time I wasn't alone. I was in the classroom, lights flickering overhead. The chalkboard was blank. Desks warped like melting wax. Erin stood by the window, her face pale. She knows, she said. I turned. Natalie was at the door. You saw too much. Then the walls bled. Not metaphorically, literal dark, tarry blood that seeped from the cracks and pooled on the floor. I couldn't move. The desks began to sink into it like quicksand. The last thing I saw was the door slamming shut, and the message scrawled in crimson across it. Class is still in session. I woke up screaming. Natalie found me at school the next day. Said she had a plan. A way to stop the room. But it would be dangerous. We need to go back in, she said. I told her she was insane. Maybe, she replied. But it's the only way. The plan was simple. Locate the room. Enter together. Plant something inside. Something from the real world and anchor. A way to disrupt its illusion. The room creates a pocket space, she explained. A parasite dimension. But if we bring in something chaotic, something it can't control, we might break it. And what do we bring? She held up a small mirror. Old, cracked, framed in iron. This, she said. It belonged to a girl who escaped in the 50s. She claimed the room couldn't reflect her when she held it. It's made from obsidian. Volcanic glass. Symbol of truth. It might be enough. It wasn't until 3 days later that we found the door again. We weren't looking for it, it found us. During lunch, the fire alarm went off. Everyone flooded into the parking lot. Natalie and I lingered near the back. Then we saw it. Room 305, where it shouldn't have been. A door on the first floor. Unmarked. Identical in every way. We walked toward it. The hallway buzzed with static. My ears rang. Time felt thick, like moving through syrup. Natalie took a deep breath. Ready? I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. We opened the door. The classroom was waiting. Desks perfectly aligned. Chalkboard empty. Lights humming overhead. The second we stepped in, the door slammed shut. The humming returned. Then the whisper. 2 for the price of 1. Natalie held out the mirror. Stay close, she said. No matter what. We walked toward the front of the room. The walls pulsed. The ceiling cracked open in seams, revealing darkness behind it. An endless black void stitched with red threads of lightning. The air became electric, sharp and sour. Then came the knock. 3 beats. From inside the chalkboard, cracked down the center, a hand emerged, not human, too long, fingers with joints that bent the wrong way, skin like tree bark soaked in ink. Natalie raised the mirror. The hand froze, then retreated. The board resealed, but the room roared. Walls groaned, desks floated. Natalie clutched the mirror, chanting something under her breath. "We're breaking it," she shouted. The floor opened beneath us. I fell, screaming, into another room. The same room, again, but different. Desks made of bones. Chalkboard bleeding words. Windows showing nothing. Just endless versions of us, staring back, each with dead eyes. Natalie landed beside me. The mirror cracked. "No," she gasped. "Not yet." The lights above shattered. Glass rained down. One shard caught my arm. I barely noticed. A voice boomed. "You belong to me." Natalie stood, blood dripping from her lip. "We don't belong to anyone." She threw the mirror at the chalkboard. The impact shattered both. Light exploded from the break, and everything fell apart. We woke up somewhere between dreams and death. The light was unbearable. Not sunlight, not fluorescent, but something between the two. Cold and hot at the same time. My skin prickled as if it were being peeled in slow, invisible layers. I reached for my face and realized I couldn't feel my fingers. Couldn't move them. Couldn't move anything. I floated. Natalie was next to me, or maybe above me. The space we were in had no gravity. No up or down. Just presence. Shapes without edges. Sound without origin. I saw the remnants of the mirror spiral around us, frozen in a bubble of broken glass and shadow. Time didn't work here, but pain did. Suddenly my chest burned, like someone had driven a railroad spike through it. I screamed, but no sound came. My mouth opened and I saw my breath crystallize, even though the air wasn't cold. Then a voice, clearer than before, spoke from every direction at once. "You tried to break the rules." Natalie convulsed, her arms flailing as she twisted in the lightless void. She tried to reach for me, but her fingers slipped through air like it was water. "You are mine now. Both of you." "No!" I shouted. This time it worked. My voice echoed, bounced off unseen walls, came back louder and stranger. "Warped. We didn't choose this," I cried. Silence. Then came the slow, awful laughter. Not human, not even animal, just wrong. A sound made of teeth and hunger and old stone shifting underground. Neither did I. I saw it then, not clearly but enough. It wasn't a shape or a face. It was a void, a classroom with no end, a hunger given form. The room, it wasn't just a place. It was alive, or had once been, and now it wanted to be remembered. I reached for Natalie again. This time our hands touched, skin on skin. The moment we connected, everything twisted. The void peeled like a rotten fruit, and we fell through again, down, down like stones in a bottomless lake. I landed hard, this time on a real floor, wooden, warped by water damage and years of dust. The air smelled old, like attic spaces and burned paper. I coughed and sat up. We were in a classroom again, but different, very different. Desks were overturned. Mold covered the corners. A large crucifix hung sideways over a blackboard, cracked straight down the center. The air was heavy with incense and mildew. Natalie staggered to her feet. "Where are we now?" she asked. I looked around. The walls were painted green. Old-style blackboards, the kind with sliding panels. Above the board, a banner read, "Blessed are those who obey." "What the hell?" I whispered. Then I saw the year, carved faintly into the wooden frame of the window. 1942. Natalie read it too. "It took us back," she said. "No, it sent us deeper." We crept through the room, trying the door. It opened easily this time, but outside was not our school. It was a corridor lined with lockers, metal, rusted. Fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with flies. A crucifix hung over each doorway. A bell rang in the distance, tinny, like from an old intercom system. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Natalie grabbed my arm and pulled me into a janitor's closet. We pressed ourselves into the darkness. A figure walked past. Female, dressed in a nun's habit. Her face was skeletal. Eyes empty sockets. Skin waxy and yellow. Her hands clutched a rosary, the beads made of human teeth. She paused at the closet door. I held my breath. She sniffed, low, like an animal, then kept walking. Natalie let out a breath. "This isn't just a room anymore," she whispered. "It's a whole world, a memory maybe, or a prison built from the pieces of those it had consumed." We waited until the footsteps faded. Then we slipped out and made our way down the hall. Each room we passed showed something worse. One was filled with children frozen in place, mouths open in silent screams. Another had a man nailed to a chalkboard, his eyes replaced by blackboard erasers, bleeding ink. One door showed nothing at all, just an endless hallway stretching into darkness. "This is hell," I said. Natalie didn't answer. Eventually, we found a staircase. We climbed. Each floor took us to a different era. Then 1978. Then 1986. Each floor more broken than the last. Like layers of history, compressed into a haunted collage of suffering. We passed windows showing playgrounds filled with ash. Classrooms where shadows taught geometry to blank-faced children. Finally, on the top floor, we found it. Room 305. The original. It looked the same as ours. Same desks. Same blinds. Same color on the walls. But this time, something was waiting inside. Michelle. Erin. Whatever her name was. She stood by the teacher's desk, dressed in a school uniform that no longer fit her skeletal frame. Her eyes were hollow. Her voice a dry whisper. "You came back," she said. Natalie stepped forward. "You lied to him." Michelle smiled. "He got out, didn't he?" "At what cost?" Natalie hissed. Michelle shrugged. "It's the only way." I stepped in. "What is this place? Why do you help it?" She turned to me. "Because it's the only thing that listens. It remembers us, when no one else does." "You're not a victim," I said. "You're part of it now." She nodded. "I'm the lesson." Then the walls closed. Literally. They folded inward like an origami trap. Natalie grabbed my hand. "Hold on." Michelle raised her arms. The floor opened again. But this time I was ready. I slammed my feet into the wood. Cracked. I fell through, but I held Natalie's hand. She held mine. We didn't let go. Together, we landed in darkness. Only this time, it wasn't the classroom. It was the real world. We were outside, in the parking lot, middle of the day, bright sun, clear sky. Students bustled around us, laughing, cars honking. Everything was normal. I turned to Natalie. We were back, or so we thought, until I saw the building behind us. It wasn't our school. It was the one from the 1942 classroom. And there, carved above the main doors in black iron, St. Vincent's Academy for the Lost. Natalie looked pale. "It's not over," she said. We turned. Across the parking lot, a teacher walked past, smiling. Only she wasn't human. Her shadow walked the other direction. Natalie whispered, "It's spreading." I felt it too. The room. It hadn't been destroyed. It had grown. Now it wasn't just a classroom. It was everywhere. Every school. Every hallway. Every forgotten space where fear clings and memories rot. I felt the paper in my pocket then. Folded. Heavy. Pulled it out. It was the original note from my locker. Only now it read, "Class resumes tomorrow." We ran. But I knew, no matter how far we went, it would find us again. The room never lets go. It just waits. We didn't go home that night. We ran. Through the empty neighborhoods that never looked quite right anymore. Every street sign felt slightly tilted. Every porch light hummed a little too loudly. At some point, we ended up in an abandoned gas station on the edge of town. One that hadn't pumped fuel since the Reagan administration. Its walls papered with graffiti and faded wanted posters. Natalie sat on the curb outside, hugging her knees to her chest. I paced. My nerves were beyond fried. I was vibrating with anxiety and something else. Something I hadn't wanted to admit until now. The room had changed me. We both knew it. We didn't talk for a long time. The sky overhead had turned a shade of gray that didn't belong to any season. Not stormy, not overcast, just blank, like someone had smudged it with a giant eraser. The world was thinning, and we were caught in the margins. Finally, Natalie broke the silence. "You felt it too, didn't you?" she asked without looking at me. I nodded. "It's not just spreading. It's eating. History. Reality. Us." "I don't think it started at our school," she whispered. "I think it started long before that. Maybe it was always here." Her voice shook, and that scared me more than anything, because Natalie wasn't afraid of anything. She had stared down a room made of memories and monsters and still fought back. But now she looked like a child watching the tide come in too fast to outrun. "We need to go back," I said. She turned sharply. "Are you insane?" I shook my head. "I'm done running. If it's going to take us, I want to know why." "You already know why," she snapped. "It's hungry." "No," I said. "It's something else too. It's remembering. Every place we went in that classroom, every version, every layer, those were pieces of people it had taken. The room is a story, a loop. It survives by being told." She frowned. "So what? We cut off the ending." I paused. "No. We write a new one." That night we returned to the school. We broke in through a side door that had always been loose. No alarms. No cameras. It was as if the place had been expecting us. The halls were quiet. Too quiet. Like everything was holding its breath. And then we saw it. Not room 305. Not even a door. Just a shadow. Not cast by anything. Just suspended in midair. Flat and tall, like a silhouette burned into the wall. Natalie stepped forward. "It's not hiding anymore." I touched the shadow, and it pulled us in. There was no falling this time. No screaming. Just sudden, utter silence. We stood in a void. Flat white ground beneath our feet, stretching in every direction. The horizon was a straight black line. No curve, no texture. Like we were trapped in a blank page. Then desks appeared, one by one rising from the ground. First in rows, then chalkboard, then walls, windows. A classroom assembled itself around us like a scene being drawn in real time by an invisible hand. The last thing to form was the door. When it did, it slammed shut without a sound. Natalie stood in front of the chalkboard. Words appeared on it. "Write the lesson." She turned to me. "You were right. It is a story." I nodded. "Then let's finish it." We opened our backpacks and pulled out the only things we had left. Journals. Memories. Truth. We walked up to the board and began to write. Not in chalk, but with our hands, fingers leaving black trails like ink across a page. We wrote our names. We wrote Michelle's name. We wrote the names of the missing. We wrote what we saw, what we felt, what we feared. And as we did, the room trembled. The windows shattered outward. The walls bled text. And the floor beneath us cracked, spilling open a yawning chasm filled with voices. The room screamed, not like before. This time, it screamed in pain. because we were giving it shape, giving it an ending. I wrote one final sentence on the chalkboard. The classroom ended when someone remembered more than it did, and with that, everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Bright lights overhead. Machines beeping. Natalie was in the next bed, bruised and silent but breathing. A nurse noticed I was awake. "You're lucky," she said. "Both of you. Security found you unconscious in the teacher's lounge. Dehydrated. You've been missing for 2 days." I didn't respond, because I saw the clipboard at the foot of my bed. It had my chart, and Natalie's, but hers had a different name. Michelle Dufresne. I looked at her. She looked back, eyes full of recognition and guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't remember until we left the room. I was her, or part of her." She sat up slowly. "I think the room fractured me, made pieces of me into other people. Erin was one, Natalie another. You found the last one." My head spun. "So what now?" She smiled. "We finished the story. It's over." I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't, because outside the hospital window I saw a school bus. Empty. Its destination sign read, "Room 305. And I realized stories don't end. They wait, they watch, and they learn. I didn't go back to school after we got out of the hospital. They said I could return when I was ready, that I could finish the semester online, that I could take my exams at home. But it wasn't about being ready. It was about knowing the place wasn't the same. Or maybe it was exactly the same and I was the one who had changed. Either way, I couldn't walk those halls again without expecting the walls to sigh or the lockers to bleed ink. Michelle, no, Natalie or whoever she'd become, disappeared 2 days after she was discharged. Vanished without a trace. The hospital called her parents. But no one came. No one responded. And just like before, her records blurred and broke. I checked her file on the school server. Gone. As if she'd never existed. Her desk was empty, but no one else seemed to notice. Even the teacher acted like the seat had always been vacant. That's how the room works. It's not just a place. It's a parasite that writes you out. But I remembered, and that made me dangerous, at least for a while. I started keeping a journal. Not just a diary, but a chronicle. Every day, I wrote down what I saw, who I spoke to, and what I remembered about Natalie. Her voice, the way she stood with her arms crossed like she was constantly bracing for impact. I copied Michelle's photo from that newspaper clipping and kept it in my wallet. I scratched the words room 305 into the back of my phone. I became my own anchor, because even though the door was gone, the room hadn't truly disappeared. I started seeing it again, first in dreams, then in reflections. One day, I was walking through a bookstore downtown. It was one of those crammed little shops, all dust and incense and too many used volumes stacked in crooked towers. I turned a corner and found a door that shouldn't have been there, wedged between true crime and local history. It was gray, peeling, and the number stenciled on it in fading paint. 305. I blinked. It was gone. The clerk said I was mistaken, that there was never a door there. That night, the dreams came back worse. Only now they were different. I wasn't inside the room. I was watching it, like a camera in the corner of the ceiling, staring down into a classroom that was never quite the same twice. Sometimes desks, sometimes pews, sometimes just an open circle of chairs filled with children whose mouths moved silently in unison, like chanting without sound. One night, I saw a version of myself standing at the front of the class, hands behind his back, reciting names I didn't know. And when he looked at the camera, at me, he smiled. And that smile wasn't mine. I stopped sleeping, but still the room pressed closer. I started noticing other students talking about it. Quiet whispers between classes, offhand jokes that sounded a little too rehearsed. One boy mentioned how his cousin went missing from a school in Oregon. They found her desk still warm, he said, but the room was empty. Another girl, new in town, transferred mid-year. I overheard her telling a teacher, "This school looks like the one from my dreams." I knew then. It was spreading, like a virus but older, more deliberate, a story that had become self-aware. One night I took a walk. I ended up back at Harrison High. It was past midnight. The gates were closed, but I climbed them. The air was still, too still. No wind, no bugs, just the faint scent of ozone, like a storm that hadn't happened yet. I stood outside the main entrance for a long time. Then I walked around to the east wing and found it. Room 305, right where it had always been. The door was cracked open, and behind it, darkness. I didn't go inside, not that time, but I stood there for nearly an hour watching, listening. Sometimes I heard footsteps, sometimes whispering. Once, I heard a bell ring inside. 3 short chimes, then silence. I started visiting every night, first just to observe, but then I started writing again, on the walls, on scraps of paper, in the margins of textbooks I left outside the door. I left stories, accounts, truths. I don't know if the room read them, but I know this. The whispering stopped. Then, on the 7th night, I found something new. On the ground, just outside the door, was a single folded sheet of lined notebook paper. I picked it up. It was my handwriting, but I hadn't written it. The message read, "You are the lesson now." I stared at those words until my vision blurred, and I understood. The room didn't just feed on fear. It evolved, and I was its latest incarnation. That's why it let me go, because I carried it with me. Now, wherever I go, the room follows. In airports, in subways, in office buildings long abandoned. I see the door. I never open it, but it's always there, waiting. And sometimes just before I fall asleep, when the walls are thin and the shadows move on their own, I hear it call out from inside my dreams. Class is now in session. So if you ever find yourself walking through your school late at night, if you ever turn a corner and see a door that shouldn't be there, numbered 305, with a brass handle and no sound coming from the other side, don't open it. Because if you do, you won't walk out the same. You may not walk out at all. And if you do, you'll never be sure it was really you who left.